Our next speaker doesn't really need an introduction, but I'll give one anyways. Claudio Wunder is a staff developer experience engineer at HubSpot, a very active member in the OpenJS Foundation. So excited to have Claudio here. As he gets his laptop set up, I'll do one more announcement. If you're going to go to the OAuth 2 workshop after lunch, it's just after lunch, you should have Postman installed, and you're going to need a personal Gmail account because they're going to do some magic with OAuth tokens. So having a G Suite account will not work, and you have a personal Gmail account. So Claudio, take it away. Thank you so much.
Hey all, it's awesome to be here. So my name is Claudio, as Cody just said. I'm a senior software engineer at HubSpot, part of their platform engineering team in front-end, and I'm also part of the cross-project council at the OpenJS Foundation, where I help supporting the other JavaScript ecosystem. And I'm also a member of the Node.js project, where I help with infrastructure, their website development, and other things. So, okay, talk about the Node.js website. Well, websites are easy, so that must be a piece of a cake, right? Well, usually websites are easy to be done, but making a scalable, maintainable, newcomer-friendly solution is not trivial. The moment that I realized when I stepped up in that project, I realized I was fucked. So today I'm talking about the tales and the dungeons of the Node.js website, where I want to talk a little bit about the state of the Node.js website back then when I started, the current state of the Node.js website as today, and the challenges and adventures we had while making everything that you see today on the website. So, as every piece of software in the world, when you let it rest for a while, it becomes immediately obsolete. Because tech is ever changing, so are we. So the Node.js website, for many years, run on what we call today obsolete tech, with Meadowsmith, handlebars, which are excellent solutions, but for the today's ever-changing front-end world, they're just not enough anymore. It had a poor DX, for example, lack of proper documentation for newcomers to start contributing to the project, and outdated. A lot of the content and the design and the UX is different from what we need nowadays, and also the content is just not matching today's state of Node.js. So, obsolete tech. Well, extending upon the current state of the website, like adding any sort of new feature was pretty much rough. Extending layouts, mixing content with code was impossible because content was strictly separated from code. And, well, anything regarding accessibility and internationalization was just not really there. It was very basic, and something that maybe in the beginnings of the internet was fine, not for today. We had a poor DX, extreme lack of documentation and processes behind the architecture of the website. Why certain thing was done the way it was done? Or how can I get started? How can I add a page? How can I make any sort of change? Impossible, not there. Deployment of the website was complicated. We didn't use any sort of fancy CI or anything. It was a Git webhook going to our, well, let's say, old build infrastructure server on DigitalOcean. We were not able to monitor the deployments. You would not know when it succeeded, if it succeeded, when it started. You need to wait and refresh the website until it's maybe there. And there was no proper way of testing anything on the website. Like results, any testing, nah. So outdated content and UX. Like I mentioned, a lot of outdated content that differs from the website, you know, the current state of Node. A design that, if you ever open the Node.js website, is kind of, you know, it works, it's simple, you know. And it has poor accessibility, UX, and usability. Sometimes finding things on the website is not easy. Okay, often it's not easy. Knowing what to search there and what is available to you, what versions of Node.js, what you can download, and etc., is also non-trivial. So let's recap. Current issues that we have. It's hard to contribute. We have unreliable infrastructure, unclear structure of the code. It's hard to extend, to update, and to maintain. And well, it has a lack of basic features of modern websites. An unclear future. The website was pretty much on maintenance mode and not having any sort of active engagement. So what do we aim here? Well, we want to have a developer-first developer experience, of course, because the developers are the people that are making the website. We want to make it very well documented. We want to have very linear goals and very easy to understand processes for people to contribute on it. The tech, well, it needs to be reliable, easy to maintain, easy to extend, easy to move away if needed, because you never know if Next.js is going to be around in the next 5–10 years. So future-proof it. And of course, build on top of what exists. You don't want to reinvent the wheel. You want to keep it simple. So what's the plan? Well, we want to create a solid foundation, which is reworking the core, changing from Metalsmith, going to whatever that we decided to use, iterate on the tech. Don't make gigantic changes at once. Iterate simple. There will be a lot of missing in the first steps, but it's easy for all the existing contributors and the people that are using it. If you make iterative steps over here, make it reliable. Work with the CI/CD, add a reliable infra, testing, good practices, everything that was talked today before my talk. And finally, future-proof it. When you have a clean code base and you know very well what it's awaiting for you in the future, keep iterating on it. So in order to create a solid foundation, we need to keep the code base as generic as possible. So for example, React is something that is compatible with many different frameworks, many different runtimes. So it was an obvious choice, at least for the code base. Have a solid framework. You want to have something popular, well-known, actively maintained, widely used. There are a lot of fancy new tech always, every day, every minute. Use something that you know that probably is going to last, either because it's being backed by a gigantic company or because a lot of people use it, because there are a lot of plugins, extendability on the ecosystem. So use something that is very well known, because the chances that someone that will contribute to your website or your project will know that it exists and have an easy time adopting that, well, will be easier, right? So focus on keeping it simple. You don't want to make it bound to very specific framework technologies. So even though that we adopted Next.js, we try to make the whole API as Next agnostic as possible. You want to be able to move away from it if you ever have the chance and make the transition smooth for anyone involved. So avoid over-engineering, blazing edge, excessively fragmentation of everything, and again, using very specific technologies that then you will have a hard time moving away. Keeping it simple, of course, is hard. You clearly in the beginning you don't know what is happening in the future. You will have a hard time to foresee all the sort of changes that are needed. But here are a few tips that you can read afterwards. What I believe that is very important. Documentation. So create clear guidelines of adoption of packages, versioning of packages. Avoid overly using cleverly done packages that do way more than what you need. Often, it's easy to find an NPM package that does something for you. Often, it will do way more than what you need. Often, it will do a lot of things that you have no idea that it is doing. So my recommendation in general is go to NPM, search for something, then, oh, that's what it does, do the source code, and then you make a version of yourself for what you need that is very simple, bare bones to your needs. Guidelines regarding adoption of packages in every project is very important. Versioning, a lot of people just run npm install a package and they don't even forget, what it means from all the range of versions that will be included over that package and how they will be compatible, with your existing packages. Because npm does a lot of magic that you often don't know about it. So knowing when to reinvent the wheel or rely on what already exists is hard and unpredictable. Often for an MVP approach, like I mentioned, do it by yourself, do it simple, see if it works, see if it scales, and then, if you need something else, keep looking, keep iterating, look back on what you did already. Don't be afraid of, just jumping back into code and reworking on everything, because, code is ever evolving. So how did we make this happen? So collaborators rely on the current structure and way of productizing content. So it's very easy, when you want to adopt a new framework to just change the whole code base, change everything, the way how people already used to write pages, to write content, to write anything. Because, well, I'm reworking everything, might as well just do it. The problem here is when you're making such a fundamental core change, you don't want to break experience of everyone that relies on what you're using. Making breaking changes is easy. But adapting yourself to attend the demands of everyone that is using what you use, that's the real challenge. And that's what we did here. So as an iterative approach, migrating from one framework to another must be simple. You want to only change the actual framework part, the fundamental part that is the runtime, that builds, that deploys your website or your project. Try to keep everything else the way it is. So we migrated all the handlebars templates to React. We had a lot of legacy code on it, but we iterated over it over time so that we don't break the whole universe at once. Because often it's hard to predict, when you have massive changes if you covered everything. So then you work in the infrastructure. The Node.js website would have ever causing infrastructure issues due to the way how we deploy things to the website. So every time we made a push to the website, we would break Node.js, literally, like GitHub Actions, everyone, NVM, everything would break because the way how today caching on Cloudflare is done for our distribution assets. So it's very inconvenient when you make a push to the website to make everyone's experience horrible, don't you think? So you want to provide a reliable way to deploy and monitor this website. So we had to rework in the whole CI/CD to ensure, static builds, because, as I mentioned before, you want to make it framework agnostic. So, and also infrastructure agnostic. So if you need to have bare bones generated HTML pages, it needs to be supported. You want to have a CI that can not only test everything, but check performance score, lag host scores, coverability, internationalization, all sort of issues. So the maintainers and collaborators, they don't need to check on every commit, every PR, if they are introducing side effects that you're not even aware of. We chose Vercel for a few reasons. So you future-proof it. Like I mentioned before, you want to work on documentation, reliability, and then the feature sets, which, for example, an example is here, documentation, collaborator guides, contribution guides, technical documentation. Then, you want to introduce modern front-end development technologies like incremental static regeneration, server-side rendering, caching, edge functionalities, etc. You do, over time, iterate on top until you create a very nice product. And then you finally focus on accessibility, internationalization, visual testing, CSS frameworks, etc. Each part takes a lot of time, a lot of research. And my guidance in general is take your time to assess everything that exists in the ecosystem and what suits you the best. So yeah, accessibility and internationalization. So key focus on adoption technologies that are ease to interact for minorities and disabled people. Accessibility is often a thing that is very complex in front-end development, and it can be simple. Well, sometimes. Internationalization is also something very important. You want not only the content to be local for people, but to also have all the modern front-end technologies that allow like automatic language detection, make your content of your website left to right to left whenever needed, and other things. So of course we had challenges of that. Generating proper metadata for localization accessibility is challenging, and it requires a lot of work on how you're going to generate the metadata, when you show loaded metadata, and how you store the metadata. Because, well, bundling everything on the client side is just impossible. So knowing what to load and when to load is very important. And server-side rendering is something that is very nice here in that regard. Generating roads dynamically for different languages. Often, not all your pages are localized, but you still want to provide that page localized with the source content that is not localized, but with everything else being localized. So there are different ways of doing it, but it's often challenging to generate all those routes dynamically if you also have dynamic routes. How you adapt all the possible case scenarios of all your pages that are already dynamic by nature, but may or may not need to be localized. And making the content EQ compatible and easy to translate is also challenging because so many standards out there. It's often hard to know, well, will the people that are actually translators of my website that are non-technical at all have an easy time understanding what's the context of it? Because we as the developers, well, often we make many different message bags and we just compose that translated content in different segments of the same code. But you need to ask yourself, wow, the translator that has no idea about the context of the string, has no idea where that fits in the code, how you make the translations and the keys as easy as possible for them to understand, right? Context is very important. So for first class DX, we use GitHub Actions for CI/CD as a base. Versal for infrastructure deployment and monitoring. Storybook for testing and crafting components. So a lot of people are using snapshot testing. But on an UX perspective, snapshot testing is just unreliable because it doesn't prove anything. It doesn't give you if the layout changed, if the UX changed. It's just a bunch of text, class names, and etc. A lot of extra HTML metadata that you're not interested on. So actually doing visual regression tests is often the best way of ensuring that whatever that you're crafting, designing, and changing is actually the same across different variations. We use Tailwind for styling the website just to make the CSS simple. And we actually don't mix Tailwind class names on HTML. We actually use the approach of using CSS modules and putting the Tailwind classes there just because we want to keep the actual code as much as separate from the actual styling. Then, TypeScript for typed first development experience, React as the foundational tech because it's cross-framework compatible, Next.js for scalable and well-maintained framework, MDX for writing content and creating pages, and then we used Radix UI for accessible building blocks and Format.js for internationalization. Challenges of Next.js. The initial PR had more than, well, mostly because we have a lot of pages on the website, more than 10,000 file changes. So, of course, 98% of that was just files being moved. But it makes it really hard for your browser to be able to render 10,000 file changes on GitHub. So often reviewing would be a nightmare. Modern and legacy code bases. So like I mentioned, you make an incremental approach. So the first part was migrate to Next.js to use core, use React, but everything else, we had legacy jQuery on it and etc., like client-side only code, etc. You keep it, and then over time, you iterate, migrate, remove that. But at the moment, having modern and legacy code bases was challenging because, the whole nature of, server-side rendering, client-side rendering, and you have an idempotent code base well, often you will have hydration problems because things will differ, etc. So dealing with that is extremely complex because you don't want to break the things and you want to ensure that existing things are already running. So again, iterative updates. In the beginning, it's messy. But if you have a clear goal, what you want to do, you will achieve it. Have time. So results of adopting Next.js. We had 250% faster builds, code and warm builds. 300% increase on faster first content paint and initial rendering of the website. So when you open the website nowadays, it's very fast. Navigation between pages is instant because all the technologies and fancy strategies that Next.js does under the hood are there. So it's pretty much a PWA without being a PWA. And it's still static, so you can still access every route if you want, and we don't have layer shift anymore. Because, in the beginning we had a mix of legacy and modern code bases. Now it doesn't happen anymore. So, all right, we have a plan. So pretty much this is just a timeline. We'll make that available afterwards. But, we had a lot of issues, GitHub issues, I mean, not actually problems, and how we wanted to fragment the code, how we wanted to do everything. You can access the Node.js.org repository and see everything very well timelined, very well documented, because again, you want to make the people that are newcomers and the people that are out there to understand why certain things were done and why we chose certain things and what is the plan. Because if you don't know as a maintainer what you're doing and why you're doing a certain thing, why would your newcomer that is the first time person touching your code would know? Make it easy for them. And the last thing is we are redesigning the website. So this is a sneak peek on how the Node.js website is going to look in the future. There's Figmas available in the repository also. We are finalizing the design of the components, and then we're going after the layouts. Everything is also documented and get up discussions of the process, every step, where we are at. So if you're ever interested in contributing, you know where to start. Key takeaways of this talk. I know it's a lot of things. 25 minutes is often not enough. But when modernizing tech, follow iterative process. Take small steps at a time. Always assess all the options and alternatives out of there because there are many. There's, like, for example, testing suites. There's Jest, there's Matcha, there's Chai. There's so many different things. Take time, take a breath. See what you will probably need in the future. Don't be rushed to making decisions. Developer experience is a must. You need to have a reliability on your code base. It needs to be easy to maintain. It needs to be easy for the new people to understand what is happening in the code base. And of course, end-user-facing aspects require thoughtful and planning and open mind. You might be a developer, but you're not an expert on every fucking subject that exists out there. So be humble. Understand that you don't know anything about accessibility and internationalization, and listen to what other people have to say. That's very important. So about adventure, reach me out on NodeConf and socials to chat about the Node.js website. Some fun facts. We have 3 billion requests per month, 2 petabytes of data transfer per month. And for some reason, Node.js v14 is still the most downloaded version of Node.js. Please upgrade. Raphael already mentioned it many times, so update. Otherwise, I will make a forced redirect to v14 downloads to actually link to the v16 or v18 or whatever that is best. Don't make me do that. It's easy for me. So thank you for hearing my tale. It's very awesome to be here, able to speak at NodeConf with a lot of people that are actually passionate about this topic. And thanks for ChatGPT also for generating all those things for me, because no, that was not me at all designing those things. And thank you.
Wow, great job. We probably have time for one question, maybe 2. I gave Claudio a late start, so we have a question. Let me give you the microphone, just to be sure that everybody can hear.
Hi, awesome talk, by the way. I also love that you gave ChatGPT attribution. That was really nice. I wish it did the same, Anyways, so my name's Amal Hussein. Hi, everyone. I'm here from the United States. Come say hi. So I really enjoyed your talk. I was curious, what was the singular biggest challenge And a second question is like, what was the thing that you thought was going to be easy that turned out to be like the most difficult?
Fuck. The singular biggest challenge. I think it was realizing the mess that we are in and what are all the steps that we have forward to actually make that happen. It was very challenging to, step on the code base of the website and realize where we are at and all the vision that we had of the future. And there were many paths for achieving so. As I mentioned, I could use this easy path that is just like, whatever. I just make PRs, I approve them myself, merge them, do fast, whatever I want first. So the challenge is actually being patient and taking your time. Like I mentioned, making websites is easy, but making something that will be there after you and that people will actually understand and be able to collaborate there is very challenging. If you as a maintainer, you're not happy with your code base, and if you're having a hard time understanding it, imagine the random person that is first time contributing there. And by delegating tasks, often as a maintainer, you need to ask yourself, if you're creating an issue for people to work on, and if you yourself as a maintainer don't want to work on that, why would you create something for someone else to work on? So be mindful of that. Your second question was?
What did you think was easy that took the longest?
That took the longest. Yeah, that I underestimated. Well, it was actually the documentation. I thought that in the beginning I would just write a few documents, but then I realized making documentation is hard because if you make a documentation that becomes stale, it immediately is not useful anymore for people. So writing documentation it is already challenging by its own, but making documentation that it only surfaces the key parts of what is important and that it can be reliant for any updates of your code base, it's very hard. Because if you overwrite technical documentation, it will become obsolete. If you underwrite technical documentation, then you don't have enough. Then writing the exact key points that are very relevant for people, it's challenging. I invite you to check the Node.js repository and see all the collaborator guides, contributor guides that wrote there. It might give you a few insights of what matters, what not. Personal opinion, of course.
Great. Thank you so much. Big round of applause for Claudio. Thank you so much.